Sorry, I'm laughing. My sister just sent me a text about people at the gym. People at the gym are so fun to watch. It's just prime people watching. Okay. Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And this video is going to be about my top reads of 2022. So, I only have 10 books to discuss. I read about 54 books this year, which is a personal record for me. Most I've ever read previous to that was 2020, and I read 52 books. I'm pleased with myself about that number because 2022 was a busy year. It might be one of my busiest years, one record that I can recall. It just was work, dance, functions, repeat. I'm not even kidding. I would maybe have a free weekend, and by free weekend I mean I'm not obligated to be anywhere. I don't have any classes, I don't have any work functions, I don't have any social functions to go to. That was entirely to myself, maybe once every 4 to 5 weeks. But regardless, I remained steadfast and undistracted in my reading, and I think a lot of that had to do with putting the phone away during times that I was supposed to be reading. Yeah. I also will attribute that to just becoming a faster reader overall, but that was bad English. I attribute that to becoming a faster reader because if you watch my evolution of the reader tag, I talked about how once I read Proust, I became a faster reader. So I was flying through books at a rate that was different for me. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. Let's jump right in. I'm not going to give these wild synopses of these books. I have a review on each and every one of these books on my channel. So I'm not going to do that. I have Instagram posts on them. I don't even know if I'm going to link all those reviews down below if I feel like it, but I'm not pressed. I'm going to grab these books out of order, in no particular order, but I will save my top 3 of the year for last at the end of this video. All of these were 5-star reads for me. So out of the 54 books that I read, only 10 of them got 5 stars. So let's dive in. This is the first book that I finished in 2022, Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. This was a reread for me. The first time I read it was 2015. And I love the Outlander series. I've only read the first 3, but Diana Gabaldon, I think, is such a talented writer. She poses really interesting questions about history and an individual's role in history, and do they have a weight on how history plays out? This is a huge theme that Tolkien talks about in War and Peace. So surprise book pairing for you. War and Peace and Outlander actually have a lot in common. I adore this book. It's well written. I think Diana Gabaldon is very clever. This book is actually way more literary than it gets credit for, but it's also just fun. If you want to read it for fun, it provides that. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into the themes get juicy. So here's a rule for me. For me to consider a book for one of the top 3 spots of the year, it cannot be a reread. My top 3 of a year is only reserved for a book that's new to me. So it's my first time reading it. So because as much as I adore Outlander, and it's probably one of my favorite pieces of contemporary literature, one of my favorite series, it was not allowed to be in the top 3. But such a fun book. I'll be rereading Outlander over and over again, forever. Life in Motion by Misty Copeland. Misty Copeland is a principal dancer at American Ballet Theater, ABT, in New York City, which is one of the premier ballet companies, not just in the United States, but in the world. And she tells her journey, this is a memoir, of how she became a principal ballerina. She never wanted to be a ballerina at first. She initially wanted to be a gymnast. If you see Misty Copeland in person, I have not had the privilege. My dad has seen her perform. She's built like a gymnast. She's shorter and stockier. She's a lot curvier than your classical ballerina. And by classical, I mean the tradition of what people prefer dancers to look like, or at least currently that long, tall, lanky look. She doesn't have that. She's curvier. She's very muscular. Because she is so muscular, that's why her jumps are so good. She's springy. But this was such a simply told, yet authentic and heartfelt memoir, this book was such a treat to read, especially for me as a bunhead, you know. I just really appreciated hearing what it's like to be a dancer at the professional level. She was so graceful in how she discusses even the challenging things that she dealt with. It's just, is it the best written book I've ever read? No, but she had a co-writer and she clearly had a good editor, because there's something very authentic about this. I'm not a very emotional person, and by that I mean I don't cry a lot. It's just not how I express myself, but I got a little choked up a little bit. It was just so good, so good. If you were interested in ballet, I recommend that book. If you're interested in memoirs, if you like memoirs, I think that's a good one as well. I raved about this book when I read it at the beginning of the year. The Idiot by Elif Batuman. Celine still lives in my head rent free. I love Celine. She is such a card. She's so funny. She's witty. She just doesn't get it. And I like that she doesn't get it. And she's on the journey to understand what everybody else is understanding. And I just felt like this book is a gold mine of wit and symbolism. Okay. I know that this book is kind of like Marmite. People either love it or they hate it. I personally love Marmite, and I like this book a lot, so I gave it a 5. This was an unexpected 5 for me. I was expecting this book to be a 3 when I picked it up. I was not expecting it to be laugh out loud funny for me. And if you are a Gen X or a millennial who still was influenced by the 80s, you're old enough to be influenced by the 80s, there's just so many nods to this book, in this book, to that decade, those 2 decades. There's so much nostalgia. I just had a blast with this book. I know that some people are like, I don't get it. That's the point. Anyway, this book was just fun for me. I enjoyed it. I want to reread it. I liked it better than Either Or. There's just something about, to me, The Idiot by Elif Batuman that's special. Kaze Hikaru. This is a series. It's a manga series. I have been reading Kaze Hikaru since I was 15. I stopped reading it for a long time. Probably, when did I stop reading it? I think I stopped reading it in my teenage years. I just got distracted by other things, went to college, all that stuff. And then I picked it up this summer. Like, I got this urge to read it again because my friend Christy Lewis at Dostoevsky in Space, she was beginning her manga journey, and then I was feeling nostalgic, and I hunted down my copies of Kaze Hikaru. I had the first 5, and I hunted down the rest of them that are currently published. Some of those volumes were hard to get hold of, but I found a way. And then I was able to easily snag the most recent releases. I would read this at bed. It took me from July to the end of September to read all 30 volumes. I could have read them faster than that, but I was trying to like really savor them, because I stopped at volume 6 as a youth. And so I had a lot to catch up on, and it was just, this manga is so underrated. Man, if you're into samurai, if you're into the Meiji era, this is a shoujo, so it's really geared more towards female audiences. The main character is this 15-year-old girl who goes undercover as a samurai to avenge the murders of her father and her brother. She ends up falling in love with Okita Soji, who is an actual swordsman and was considered one of the greatest swordsmen of all time. And this is a period, it's 1863 when this series starts, and this is a period when Japan is getting a lot of pressure from other countries to open its borders. So Japan is going through a lot of change at this moment. It's just such an interesting period in history in Japan, I think. And if you are into sword fighting and samurai, and yes, there's this romance here. The romance takes forever to develop, but Watanabe does her research. If you still love the history of this period, I think that you can still get on with this. It's marketed for girls, for older teenagers, really. But I appreciate it more as an adult. The humor is spot on. This book is laugh out loud funny. not just the book, but the whole series is laugh out loud funny. And it was the whole series is a 5-star for me. It's not done yet in English. I'm gonna be 45 by the time the series ends. But I will happily read it volume 5 for volume. I'm gonna be reading this until I'm like 70. It's that good. Man, it's so funny. It's comedic. This just made me feel good. And it's smart. And it's historically accurate. There are some hidden gems in manga. If you're a fan of Rurouni Kenshin, it's the same time period. Okay? So yeah, hype about Kazuya Hikaru. It is a little violent because there are a lot of sword fights, but I'm all about that life. So I like a good sword fight. Okay. I'm going to include these two together. The Hobbits, The Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship of the Ring I have read time and time again, but it is a 5-star for me. Every time I read The Fellowship of the Ring, I just fall deeper in love with it. It's just such a magnificent piece of literature, really all of the Lord of the Rings. And The Hobbit, I read for the first time this year. I don't know why. I'm kicking myself for waiting so long to read it because I could have been enjoying it for much longer. It is just so, what is it about Tolkien? He's so cozy. Man, why? Why is it so good? I love The Lord of the Rings. Some of my favorite stories of all time. Tolkien. I didn't really care for the Hobbit movies too much. But The Lord of the Rings, in my opinion... All my books just fell over. The Lord of the Rings, in my opinion, the movies in particular, not just the books. The books are fantastic. Greatest piece of fantasy out there, in my opinion. But The Lord of the Rings as movies, cinematic achievements, Peter Jackson did the thing. Like, those movies are iconic. And my favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. That movie is deep. Man, that movie is deep. This has nothing to do with anything, but It's a Wonderful Life. You know in the beginning where the stars are talking, the angels are talking, and they're like sending Clarence to go help out George Bailey. And he was like, what is it? I'm paraphrasing. Is he sick? He's like, no, worse. He's discouraged. Discouragement is a real kicker, you guys. Man, that movie is fantastic. Yes. Okay, with all of that to say, I don't think It's a Wonderful Life can be beat. But The Lord of the Rings is my close second. All 3 of them. Let's move forward. Let's get into the last 4 books. Jane Eyre. My favorite book of all time. This is my 4th read of this book. I read it in 2022. So that was a whole mouthful of nothing. I read it for the first time in 2022. 4th time? Yes, the 4th time. I read this book every 3 to 4 years, but this was the first time I had annotated it and reviewed it. And Jane, it's kind of like when I read The Fellowship of the Ring and when I read Lord of the Rings. It's just each reread solidifies why I love it so much. So good. There's just some of the most iconic quotes in the English language literary canon is in Jane Eyre. I am no bird and no net ensnares me. All of that stuff. Charlotte Bronte was ahead of her time. Jane is a timeless character. Fantastic writing. Great themes. I have a recent review, so please feel free to go back and watch that review if you haven't already. But again, not included in my top 3 because it's not new to me. But if it's an easy 5 out of 5 because every time I read it, it just gets better. My Jane, I'm so hyped, like I'm stuttering. My girl Jane ages like fine wine. Okay? Yes. I'm really moving through this. I'm proud of myself. There's not much to say. I've talked about these books ad nauseum in the review. So, side note, before I get into the last 3, can we all appreciate the grandma sweater? I'm currently, signs of age, I'm currently into really oversized baggy knit V-neck sweaters. The Mr. Rogers vibes is what I aspire to. That was not good English. Mr. Rogers vibes are what I aspire to. It's effortlessly chic though. I feel like coastal grandma. Pair with a pair of skinny jeans, an easy tee, some gold bling, a pair of flats. Effortlessly chic and cozy. All right. Now we're getting into the top 3. In third place, drum roll please. These should come of no shock to those who've been watching. A Gentleman in Moscow by my guy Amar Tolls. I love this book. This book is the epitome of wholesomeness. It's so wholesome. This book would be so easy to make it depressing and grungy and bleak. It is so wholesome and feel good, and it's all about the importance of relationship and friendship and how that is what really enriches life and makes life worth living, or the relationships that we have. This book is just so good. It's so good. It is worth the hype. It is cozy. It's just, these characters are amazing. The relationships between these characters, the way that the main character, though he is locked up under house arrest during the Bolshevik ruling in Russia, he just always puts his best foot forward. And he accepts his lot for what it is, and he's the better for it. It's just, this book is so good. If you were on the cusp of, should I read this book or should I not? Read this book. It is so good. It will make you feel like all is right in the world. It's wholesome. There's no other word to describe this book but wholesome. 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 I gave this book away as a Christmas gift to one of my good friends because it's just wholesome. So good. No, Amar Tolls is such a gifted writer. He's so good. I can't wait to read his other books. I'm reading Rule of Civility this year. Second place should be of no surprise. Demon Copperhead by my girl, Barbara Kingsolver. This book barely made it over past A Gentleman in Moscow. They were neck and neck, but they were close. But there's something about this coming of age story of this young man in Southern Appalachia in Southwest Virginia that there was something about it. The voice is so authentic of this young man narrating all of his woes in life, but there's this undercurrent of hope, and the ending is so wholesome. I literally just got to chill. It was just so good. I never wanted this book to end. I'm like shaking. Barbara Kingsolver nailed this character, and it pays perfect homage to David Copperfield. This book is immaculate. Immaculate. It's so good. This is modern contemporary writing at its best. One of them. I mean, people say, I've said it myself, sometimes I feel like there's something about the majority of contemporary fiction that's lacking. I just can't put my finger on it. Like, what is it? Is it the editing? Are people becoming looser editors? Because sometimes when I read books like Jane Eyre and then I pick up a contemporary book and I read Dickens and I'm like, are we Virginia Woolf, Jane Austen? I'm like, why don't these contemporary books have that je ne sais quoi of the classics? Then I pick up something like this. Then I pick up something like A Gentleman in Moscow. I'm like, yes, the spice is still there. This book, phenomenal. If you like coming of age stories, if you like the premise of David Copperfield, if you like books that discuss the grit in society and the issues in a way that doesn't seem preachy, but it's still blunt, my girl nails it. In this character, Damon or Demon Copperhead is so endearing. You just root for him from beginning to end and you just want the best for him. And another reason I love this book is because he just learns how to overcome adversity in a way that is authentic. I could see how this book could be encouraging to people who may have or are currently dealing with the issues that he's dealing with. Broken home, foster care system, a community that is riddled with drug abuse and alcohol, generational addiction, and to have a character that comes out on the other side of that. This book is encouraging, even though it is sad, but it ends so perfect. One of my favorite endings of a book. Hype. Oh my gosh, you got to read this book. It is so good. Okay. Last but not least, my top read of the year. The Grapes of Wrath. My boy John Steinbeck is a poet. He is a rapper. I love him. This book was so good. The writing was I'm getting chills. This book is so good. The writing was so incredible. I wanted to throw the book across the room and run around my block to old school charismatic Pentecostal church organ and do a two-step around the block. You know what I'm saying? This book, does it get any better? One of the top books I've ever read in my life. This book is now on my new, I have to do a revised video. I'm going to do an updated, my top 10. What I'm going to do is my top 10 classics and my top 10 contemporary. I'm going to start splitting them up because I actually find that harder to do than putting just my top 10. But top 10 classics of all time. So good. This book, it is bleak, depressing, rough, but it's so good. You have this family, the Jodes, who are on their way to California from Oklahoma because they are trying to have a better lot in life. The government is beating them down. They're literally, their home has been bulldozed. And so this is during this migration to the West during the Dust Bowl. So the economy is trash. And people are just struggling to make ends meet. And Steinbeck just has this epic narrative about the little guy just trying to get it on in life. He's just trying to make his ends meet. It's just the most American of all American novels. And the way that John Steinbeck writes just dialect, this book, it's just good. It's just good. One of the best pieces of literature I have ever written. One of the best pieces of literature I have ever read. Classic, contemporary, translated, not translated, doesn't matter. This is just one of the best books I've ever read. Period. Okay. This was short, sweet, and to the point. I didn't feel like these dramatic synopses or whatever. It was just for, wanted to make this a little bit more fun, chatty. I don't know. You might not have seen a difference. But those are my top 10 books of the year. Those are my top 3 books of the year. Have you read any of those books? Are they on your to-do list, your to-read list? How did you feel about them? Please let me know in the comments below, what were your top 3 reads of the year? And were you a big fan of some of these books like I was? So yes, feel free to leave me a comment. Also feel free to like, subscribe, follow me on the Instagrams where I get up to more book shenanigans. And I will see you in the next one.